Hello and welcome to NewsClick. Today we have with us Professor Chandrashekhar from Jawaharlal Nehru University. Welcome to NewsClick.
Nice to be here again.
Currently we are hearing a lot of talk about currency wars. Particularly China seems to be under the anvil for not letting its currency appreciate. What do you think is the basic pressure that is being put on China? That do you think it's really something that China needs to do, or is it a part of other countries trying to use China as an excuse to stabilize their currencies?
Well, in some sense, China becomes a candidate for bashing because of its success. And it is true that if you look at the country which in some sense in today's global trade is able to sustain, particularly vis-a-vis the United States, sustain both trade and current account surpluses and has built up huge foreign exchange reserves. China is a country which in some sense epitomizes that tendency in the world system, which is referred to as global imbalances and so on and so forth. But the point is, it's not, I mean, China is only a reflection of what is a deeper trend. If it hadn't been for China, it would have been some other set of countries, some other country which would have been in China's position. And that is basically that we happen to be in a world in which, because of the fact that capital is mobile, technology is mobile, but labor isn't, there are two ways in which this mobility affects countries. One way is that it actually takes productive capacities to few, not all countries which have large labor surpluses which are cheap, and they therefore become production hubs for the world system, and that generates trade and current account surpluses. And the second is countries become the target for the flow of surplus finance. So therefore, there are two things which tend to push up currencies. Okay. One is the fact that you have trade and current account surpluses, not all. Two, even countries which have trade and current account deficits like India actually see pressure for their currencies to appreciate because of the flow of capital, just financial capital. Now, in that context, if you say that what you're basically saying is that we think that the problem is that if China is not allowing this to work itself out and allow its currency to appreciate because it wants to retain its competitiveness, and therefore it is contributing to, in some sense, a cumulative imbalance. The way I'd look at it is, look at the other side of the imbalance. Well, if China does this, will America really benefit? No. Maybe it would be India which benefits, maybe it would be some East Asian country which earlier was a miracle which would once again become a miracle, maybe it's some Latin American country, maybe it's South Africa. So you would be in a world in which what would happen is, so long as there exist countries which have these labor reserves which can become production hubs, this kind of imbalance will continue, and it will continue all the more because this kind of a system, since it generates large surpluses and profits, is a system which is prone to underconsumption and therefore a slow process of growth in the world system.
So effectively the financialization of the developed countries is one part of the problem, that they have lost manufacturing. Manufacturing is really moving to other countries. Their financialization and their attempt to really make money through financial services and so on, and not through manufacturing, that's really one of the major reasons for the imbalance?
Yeah, sure, because let's ask ourselves the question, which is the center of global finance? It is the United States. I mean, of course, there's the City of London, and so on, but it is the United States. Every major international firm almost is sort of originates from the United States. Why did that happen? That happened because for a long period of time, dollar has been the reserve currency. Dollar is as good as gold. Why has dollar been as good as gold? Not because America is the most competitive economy. It's because of the fact that America is the global superpower which provides the policing for global capitalism. Okay, so now America is caught in a trap. If you're not economically competitive and China is getting all this benefit, what should happen is you can let the dollar depreciate vis-a-vis the RMB and get whatever benefits you get from allowing the RMB to appreciate vis-a-vis you. Now, you obviously don't want to do that because you want to have a certain degree of stability of the dollar relative to a lot of other currencies, because that is what makes you the hub for global finance. You will actually stop being the hub for global finance because people would then begin to think that obviously you no more have the power, non-economic, to be able to ensure that the dollar is as good as gold, even though we know that in Fort Knox or wherever it is, there isn't enough gold to back the dollar liquidity in the world system.
Now, that's an interesting point that emerges, that one of the reasons for the currency wars is that today we really don't have a gold standard backing the currencies. And what was the gold standard, the dollar namely, no longer has the power, maybe imperial overreach, lack of competitiveness, whatever. So effectively we are entering into a longer term instability of the currencies. Would you say that that's a possible prognosis?
Yeah, but the way I look at it is, given the fact that we've seen so many years of development under capitalism, and therefore and also we've seen a growing complexity of the sort of financial system which sits on top of capitalism, to expect a gold standard in the sense that for any country or to actually have enough gold to back the liquidity that you will need, even if you don't have a burgeoning of finance of the kind that we've seen, is difficult. So it has to be a system in which there exists a kind of global governance arrangement in which it's possible for you to maintain some degree of stability of one or a set of currencies. And what has happened today is that has broken down because there is no global leader. The old one has lost its leadership, but there is no new one to take its place, which after all we know is typical of a situation of deep crisis.
Do you think it's possible that, for instance, what Bankasur talks about, what Venezuela has also backed, that in some sense delinking the currencies from dollar and moving to a situation where they create, in that sense, a currency and a system which is backed up by raw material assets on the ground? Do you think that's a possible way of looking at how currencies can be pegged against each other?
Yeah, the first part I completely agree with. We need to actually come to a world in which everybody isn't looking at dollar markets, dollar currency. If there's any flight to safety, it's always to the dollar. That has to, and the only way you can do that is for a set of countries to come together. But I don't think you can finally, which is what I was suggesting, find one or a set even, maybe to a certain extent oil, but it's so unevenly distributed that it's difficult for countries to be able to sustain a system which is backed just by oil. So I think what we need is an arrangement, an economic arrangement in which confidence in currencies is created because of the fact that there's a confidence in the kind of global governance arrangement that we have. People talk about the SDR as an alternative to the dollar, but that's not a global currency. It's just a unit of account.
About 4 currencies coming up.
Predominantly, yeah, exactly. And it's a strange argument because countries can hold their reserves in that combination which constitutes the SDR of these 4 currencies, and don't have to all hold it in SDR. So this whole idea that you have to increase the availability of SDR so that people can hold their reserves, governments can hold or central banks can hold their reserves, is I think, it really doesn't make any sense. But if you have a currency or a basket of currencies which together constitute something in which people can invest with some confidence because of some arrangement, global arrangement, then we have a way towards that delinking without searching for that particular
currency.
particular material item which can constitute the back.
Do you think that China's basic relationship with other countries, they are trying to hold not dollar as reserves but also euro as reserves, all this is also going to make a difference?
Yeah, it results, there is a strange tension. On the one hand, there are people who would like to woo China so that China, gives a certain degree of stability to their currencies by shifting around its reserves. But on the other hand, you have a situation in which, let's say, Japan, for example, recently decided to intervene in markets to prevent its currency from appreciating because it's been through recession for so long. But on the other hand, it's finding there's this pressure for this currency to appreciate. And say a country like Brazil then said that, my God, there seems to be a currency war and we should do something about it. And the moment you say that, then attention turns to China, because China is also preventing. But everybody then focuses on China rather than say that, listen, this is a problem. I mean, India is trying to do that at different points of time. South Korea is trying to do it with the won. Brazil is trying to do it with the real in different ways. May not be successfully as China. But the attention then gets focused on China without it being realized that what we are talking about is a more generalized crisis of the system.
Do you think that one of the problems also is that it did appear at one point euro might be a rival to the dollar, but with the euro crisis, particularly the Greek crisis, Ireland, other possible crisis, euro is no longer looking as rosy as it did earlier. Do you think that has also intensified the currency wars?
I mean, the fact that there actually doesn't exist the material basis and the political will to ensure the unity for that zone to operate with a single currency has actually undermined the ability of the euro to emerge as an alternative, at least in the near future.
So what you're looking at is a longer term instability in terms of currencies before we come to a new basis where dollar is no longer the king, but one amongst the equals.
Yeah, and an instability in currencies means also an instability in a more fundamental sense in the system.
Thanks.